All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jason Flame, and thank you for joining us on another episode of the Master Motivation Podcast. Today, I'm joined by a special guest, Pat Montoya. He's the president of Not One More, a nonprofit drug awareness organization that started in 2012 to bring education and support regarding the effects of substance use disorders in our communities. We do this by creating community partnerships to raise awareness and prevent drug abuse through education, support, and community relationships. Pat has lived in Simi Valley area all his life. He was born in Oxnard. He's married to Debbie with two boys, 24 and 29. Hey, Pat, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jason. Good to
Hey,
be here.
thanks for scheduling kind of last minute, and you just spoke with our Rotary Club last week, and I was just so intrigued by the topic and just your story and what you shared with all of us that I couldn't wait because I'm actually booked until the end of this year and into 2023, but I had to fit you in. So here we
Thank
are.
you. I
Can
appreciate that.
can you tell everybody a little bit more? Just explain what Not One More is, and then we can talk a little bit more about your story.
Okay, so as you said, in 2012 we started where we were concerned parents of what we were seeing in our communities as far as drug abuse, drug use, and drug overdoses, and that were hitting in our communities. Primarily, it was under like heroin use that we were seeing out there in 2012. With the loss of a couple of local kids here that were regular high school kids, people that you wouldn't think that would be using heroin or anything like that. So we came together, we formed this coalition, and we wanted to bring awareness. We weren't, as I mentioned before at your meeting, I want to hit the community that doesn't know what's going on. Basically, I already have my community of people that we support and we help out there, and that's our primary purpose is to help people and let people know that they're not alone in this.
Yeah.
As the years have gone by, we've noticed that we've had, not only the drug issues going on, but the whys of what we're seeing out there, the mental health issues. COVID was a big issue in the last couple of years that we're seeing. A lot of drug use, a lot of relapses, rehabs were closed and meetings weren't happening and things like that. But we were also seeing what it was doing mentally to our kids out there. And as I spoke this last spring in all the high schools here in Simi Valley, and we did their ninth grade health classes. And the primary thing that the kids miss when I ask them these questions, I asked them, what do you think is the primary, issue that you see going on out here mental health wise? And they said it was us not being in school and seeing our friends out there
Hmm.
and being isolated,
Yeah.
which
No.
naturally being young kids, they need to be out,
Well, and I think that was often overlooked during COVID is just that whole missing social aspect and like you said, the effect that it has on their mental health. Hey guys, thank you for joining us today. We got Pat Montoya from Not One More that we're talking with right now. I see that there's several viewers out there. If you're watching, please let us know. It looks like we have a Facebook user. I'm wondering if that is from Sydney or Sydney, Australia. Let us know. And if you have any questions as we're talking with Pat, please drop your questions in the comments. So, Pat, can you tell us a little bit more? Getting a little bit personal. You know, what has your experience been, and what were some of the reasons that you got involved with promoting Not One More?
Okay, well, as on top of what we're seeing happening in our communities, even being a youth football coach and youth coach in there and watching some of our kids growing, going into high school, they started getting into this experimental stage of their lives, and they were getting into these highly addictive drugs and stuff. It has affected my family. It is within my family. One of my loved ones is, actively using, and it's something that we never thought. High school football player, baseball player, you know, plans to go to college. This is what we expect, and that's what we have, nurtured in our kids that they were going to move forward in their lives, and they hit this, the stuck button, where they got stuck into this, experimental stage of their lives, and
Hmm.
they found out that this stuff is highly addictive. So yes, it has involved with my family, but most of all, just the community I live in, and that concerns me.
And when you were
So
talking with us, at the Rotary meeting, something that really stuck out to me was when you were talking about, parents doing the right thing, raising their kids right. And, a lot of parents assume that it will never happen with their kid.
Right.
Sometimes parents just don't know what's going on with their
Right.
children. They think they might, but they really don't know. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how you,
Sure. I mean, we were all in high school at one time, and we looked at our parents at a different light at some point in our lives. And, the words they said, didn't mean much to us. And I get that. I get that. That's them growing up. That's them growing into their own. But, just watching what we see today with our kids and the mental health issues and they're self-medicating and what they do to get through that. In today's world, we're dealing with marijuana issues. We're dealing with what we're seeing with a lot of our youth out there using marijuana. They don't say it's a gateway drug. I don't know who a they is, but an active, maybe someone who's actively using that. But, I always tell them, take it away from you and let's see what happens.
mm-hmm,
So everything has an addiction part to it. So, raising our kids is, something that we do, and we do it to the best that we know how. And this is where I often counsel parents when their child gets into addiction and stuff like that. Had nothing to do with how you raised your kid. They made a choice, and that choice is highly addictive at this time. And these kids get into this stuff, and all of a sudden it just takes off and snowballs. And it takes anywhere from 6 months to a year, 2 years before a parent really finds out that their child is actually using or in an addictive area of their use.
mm-hmm,
We have what we're seeing today is a lot of kids that are that we're seeing passing away on us. Then they're getting younger and younger. The experimental stage is they're trying a pill, and these pills are mimicking a pharmaceutical drug such as oxycontin, and they're actually illegally made pills, pill press they call them, to mimic a pharmaceutical pill, which has fentanyl in it. And in today's world, it's not the pharmaceutical version; it's the illegal, from over the border. And primarily, this fentanyl is coming from Mexico at this time, and it's coming in, and people are making these purchases and selling these drugs to these kids, and they're passing away on the first time they've ever used. So we're not talking about drug addiction; we're talking about the experimental part, and and it's being mixed into everything out there. Every illicit drug seems to have some kind of fentanyl on it, or be aware of that it might have that in
mm-hmm.
it.
Yeah,
From Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, that's just so super sad to hear. I mean, it's heart wrenching to think
Right.
about it and to know
Right.
what's going on. Now, you were talking about fentanyl and how much fentanyl could actually
So,
kill you.
so 3 milligrams. It's grains of salt. If you were to measure it out and put it out on a paper plate, it would be just grains of salt would be lethal to some.
That's
So,
insane.
so you don't, and with these pills, you don't know the amount that they're putting into these pills. That's why these kids are dying. So
Hmm.
it's 3 milligrams. That is, grains of salt versus an amount. So that's why it's so simple to bring over the border, because it's such a minute amount that is needed.
Hmm.
So, and that's
Yeah.
that's the hard part about it.
Yeah. Hey, I wanted to throw this up there and say hi to Sean, Sean from Millennia Fair Network. We'll talk about that another time. But his comment here, Renee Torgerson, his mother-in-law, and Patton, not one more, showed incredible support with my brother-in-law Morgan. So thanks for sharing that, Sean. And guys, those of you
Yeah,
watching, there's over a dozen people watching right now. If you have any questions, any comments, anything that you'd like to add to this discussion, please just post it in the comments below. Um, you were talking about addiction and we're talking about drugs, but there's other forms of addiction, and one of those forms of addiction that you really highlighted was cell phone use and social
yeah,
media, right?
yes.
Talk about that a little bit.
So what we're seeing out there, and most parents don't know what their kids are getting into, and this is what um, we think that the innocence of a kid isn't going to be going into these certain dark webs or social media sites that have it even goes to sexual predators out there that are preying on our kids out there, and
Hmm.
we read about this all the time. some kid runs away to go visit some guy, in another state and runs away from home or something like that. But these kids are buying this stuff on the dark web and or in their private social media sites. We're seeing a lot of that. You can buy heroin on Craigslist, and I've seen it advertised on it. They advertise it as, black tires. I have black tires available for you. It's a coded message that they put out there, but the ones who
Mm-hmm.
know. And so social media is a big influence on our children because it's just what it is. We're throwing tons of information out to our children whose brains aren't ready to fully developed and ready to handle a lot of this pressure that is coming through the internet, and
Mm-hmm.
and we're assuming that they're okay with it. But and I'm talking about I don't know how many kids are really do bad things on the internet or are in it, but I've known enough that I just go, wow, to hear some of these kids talking about some of the
Mm-hmm.
stuff that they are involved with on social media that the
Mm-hmm.
parents will never ever see.
Right, right,
And,
right.
and they speak truthful to us about it because it bothers them. And some kids are concerned about that.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
My wife is watching right now, and she says, "What advice do you have for parents of younger teens to best educate them?"
To best educate them, I says, is keep an open dialogue with them. Always keep the honesty part of open dialogue with them. And it doesn't have to be necessarily of drugs, but what it is having that trust built between parents and kids, because we now have a disconnection between our kids. And we've seen this, I think I mentioned this at the Rotary, but what we've seen, the positive thing I seen out of COVID was families were eating dinner together again, and they were doing family things together. And you've seen it everywhere, walking, riding bikes, and doing all this stuff. Something I haven't seen in 25 years or more, that, families that, and our family always sat down for dinner, but that didn't stop from, what happened within my family. That's not that wasn't my fault in a sense, but, it's how we nurture our kids. Instead of letting somebody else raise them, we need to be involved with them
Mm-hmm.
in all aspects, and the choices are going to be theirs, and that's the truthful part about it is, the choice will be theirs. That's why a parent's go, where did I go wrong, where did I go wrong? If you had an open communication with your children, and you were honest with each other, and everybody's, not to do drugs. When I go to schools, I tell kids, I can't tell you not to do drugs because I'm the only person that can do that is you. So we just put it on an individual basis. I go, it's going to be your choice when you go ahead and pick up something out of curiosity or whatever. In today's world, it isn't the fun thing anymore. People, like I said, the fentanyl and these drugs are so high powered. The marijuana is so high powered nowadays that these kids mentally can't handle a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
open
You know,
dialogue
wh-
is key.
when I was a kid, the Dare program was kind of a big deal.
Right,
Say no to drugs, and it was started by Nancy Reagan, I believe. And
right,
I remember, for me, it was actually really cool because as a martial artist, I got to be part of a demonstration team. So when the Dare unit went out to the schools, we went as the demonstration team and just kind of highlighted how martial arts was a positive
right.
outlet for them, and it just tied together. We don't see that in schools anymore. We don't
No,
have a Dare program in the schools. Um, but you're going out to the schools. What are some ways that you see, and maybe you don't have all the answers yet, but how can we get more of this education into the schools on a more regular basis? And
we
why do we
have to
not have a Dare program?
we have to recognize that this is a public us issue, not a me or I problem, but a we problem. And it is in our schools, and it's very prevalent. And like when we first started, we had pushback from schools because they didn't want to ruin the reputation of their school because it means that we have drugs in the schools. And I got some phone calls shortly after we started Not One More. People go, I would never move to Simi Valley because you guys are recognized as the heroin capital of the world. When we went on the Dr. Phil show, and it was it was a wake up call to our communities.
Hmm.
And so when that happened, I told somebody, I go, I'd rather live in a community that's doing something about it and talking about it than sit in a community that knows about it and does nothing. and to me to be involved with this, and our community has really come together, and that includes Moore Park, Thousand Oaks people. I got all these advocacy groups that are local here that are trying to get out there into the schools, but a lot of times, and not no blame for the teacher, because I get it, because curriculum is number one, but they don't have time to teach the extra part of what these new drugs are doing to our society. When I went into one of the schools, I asked the kids what lessons are, because we went there on their drug education week. So, and this is in the high schools, and they said that that book was last written, the materials that were given, the curriculum that was given for drug awareness was written like in 2012 or 2008 or something like that. It's outdated for what what is going on today.
Mm-hmm.
So they definitely have to teach a different aspect of that. And groups like us, we don't charge to come in and talk about this, because we want kids to live. We want parents not to have to go through what some of our parents have gone through. Just
Mm-hmm.
like we've mentioned earlier, that speaker that mentioned Renee, and she's one of our great, she's always been our backer of us and not one more, and she has a tragic story behind that. And I don't want to hear these tragic stories from the get-go, from the beginning. There's some of us that are living it now that are trying to do something about it, and they're all over the place, and we're really trying to see that, and it's really blossomed across the country. I do have 16 chapters across the country of parents, families, and friends that are trying to bring awareness to their communities,
Mm-hmm. I think
in
that's
any way possible.
I think that's great. And as a Facebook user said, and I apologize, I don't know your name, but they say the schools need to bring back all these helpful programs,
They
and I
do.
agree, because I don't even think that we have Red Ribbon Week, because I think, like you said, the schools sometimes don't even want to admit that there's a problem, and b, they're afraid to recognize it as even happening, because they feel like if they teach it, they are exposing it. But I can tell you
Yeah.
there's a lot more things going on in the schools that the kids are being exposed to that
Yes.
maybe they don't need to be. And this is something that I think is important. Here's another one, and this might be the same Facebook user, but it says, "Thank you, Pat, for caring for the broken. If it wasn't for you, I would have never found my church, Victory Outreach, who has helped tremendously with her husband's addiction." So thank you for sharing
Oh,
that. We appreciate you.
beautiful. I know who that is.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. Thank you.
let's talk a little bit more about what are your goals right now as we speak, to get more into the schools, to get more involved in the community. What kinds of things that are you doing? I mentioned you came to our Rotary group. What other groups are you going to?
Well, we go through, well, at Simi Valley, we haven't had a meeting in a while, but Simi Valley formed a task force on heroin prevention. And it could be changed. That name could be changed to drug prevention, out there. But, the communities, and I'm talking about our community leaderships, need to start coming together and recognizing what is the reality of what we're facing out there. And we
Hmm.
see it every single day. Every time you pick up a newspaper or you listen to the news, there's somebody else, a drug related something going on, whether it's a death, a robbery, a beating, something going on like that, that is, prevalent in the drug world out there. But a lot of it is involving our young kids out there.
Hmm.
And that's primarily what we focus on is, the adolescents to 21 years old. Everybody's included, but my goal is to get into the schools to the younger people on a consistent basis. Not just that one time you go in there and hit it. We have to change the mindset. We have to keep that mindset. It's changed what it was. Old school, yeah, it isn't the same as when I went to high school. That's cool. I got to change that though. We have to be willing to open to that. Quit digging the
Hmm.
heels in and start walking along with this and recognizing that. It
Well,
doesn't cost much to put education out there and put awareness out there.
I hope that people that are watching this and agree with you as I do, share this video so that more people are seeing it and seeing if we can get the right contacts to make these things happen.
Right.
And
Well,
let's
and
let
and, and I think that's one of the biggest things is trying to do. Let's see, who do we got?
so
You
this is my
mentioned
wife
marijuana
again.
as a gateway drug. Why are so many pushing back on it now, saying it isn't? Well, because it's lobbying. It's about just like the illicit drugs like OxyContin when it first came in. Um, um, when it first came in, the Purdue Pharma wrote these reports out saying it was non-addictive, and they push it through the CDC, which approves all the not CDC. I forget who it is that approves all the drugs that go through, but they pushed it through, and pretty soon now we have this drug epidemic that is sweeping our country. That started basically from the pills, but when we started getting rid of the pills, now people started moving into the heroin part of it because
Hmm.
now we have addicts out there. And you look at anybody, it doesn't matter. I mentioned this too. It doesn't matter about young kids, but it also includes the elderly too. That is concerning because they take a lot of these pain meds, and when you wean somebody off of it, you go through a withdrawal similar to a
Hmm.
heroin withdrawal, and
Yeah.
their bodies ache, they hurt, they're sick. So yeah, it's a different it's a different world out there. We have to adapt to that. We have to bring this and put our feet on the ground and start talking about this more. And we've been doing it for 12 years, but there's still work to be done.
Hmm.
It's not going away. And Ventura County, we are doing some great things. They have the prescription drug task force out there that goes after the at a time there was the dirty doctors and dirty pharmacists that were prevalent out there. You can get any prescription from a doctor, not any doctor, but some of these doctors were selling prescriptions, and then you go to these pharmacies on their docket, and they would give you as many pills as you wanted.
Oh, this is
So, and
crazy.
it's
This is
yeah, and
crazy.
this crazy thing started. Like I said, it was starting pre 2012, but when we all woke in our group was 2012, and that's when we formed this thing. Believe me, it has not been an easy job to do. It's a very tough when you lose somebody, or somebody calls you up and they said, my child's gone, or my father, my mother,
Hmm.
somebody. I mean, it doesn't matter. I've watched all the people's passings from different age groups,
Hmm.
and we're
Yeah.
great. And these kids are being raised now by their grandparents, and a lot of addiction. It's this whole big vicious circle that's going on right now. So
Yeah,
yeah,
so unfortunate, and as you were telling your stories at the Rotary Club, there were just certain moments when you were talking about some of the children, some of the parents, and thinking about what they're going through. It's to me, it's just truly heart wrenching. I just could not imagine, how I would respond. Thank you, Jeff, for watching, and Jeff says thank you, Pat, for all you've done and continue to do, and thank you, Jason, for having Pat on the show. I'm
thank you,
grateful
Jeff.
to have him on the show. Such an important subject. And a Facebook user is asking, Pat, do you think alcohol is a gateway to other drugs as well?
I think anything you do that alters the way you think in your brain has an addictive property to it. And then the other part is the addictive brain, what your brain is actually tuned to. And some people, they could take that one drink and walk away from it. They could take that one drug and they can walk away from it. They could smoke weed one time and they can walk away from it. But the ones who don't, the ones who get addicted to it, that's when it starts managing addiction is when it starts managing your life, your job, your family, and everything else over everything else. When it manages all of that, and drug addiction takes the top notch on that, that's to me is addiction,
Hmm.
as we're watching our kids go through that. Yeah,
Well, let's talk about the issue with vaping. I remember when vaping first came out, it was totally different than
right.
what it is now, and what's in it. I mean, I'm baffled by
Yes.
the use of it now. It's just so prevalent, and it's almost just like marijuana. Vaping in some people's minds has just become accepted, and not
Right.
realizing the impact that it has, and the effects that it has long term. You
Right.
mentioned something about vaping. Basically, the vapor, it gets into your lungs, and
Yeah.
it's like giving you pneumonia.
Yeah. So what it is, and when I go to the schools and I tell these kids, because their lungs aren't fully developed yet, obviously kids are growing, and that's why they keep on growing through high school and sometimes into college and stuff. But they usually peak out, but that's the same with their brains and stuff, and their lungs and all their vital organs. When when you and what I said was what vaping is a liquid that you superheat into a vapor and it forms back in as a liquid into your lungs, which primarily, in a nutshell, forms a form of pneumonia in your lungs because you put liquid onto your lungs and now you can't get rid of that. Sometimes it just stays in there and you get this like a almost like a smoker's cough. And I forget what there's actually a terminology to that, but you also get some of the permanent damage you get as a thing called a popcorn lung, which puts these little nodules all over your lung and it makes it hard for you to breathe.
Wow.
Not everybody, but people have gotten into that. So
And I'm not 100% educated on all of it, but from what I understand, a vape can come in the form of a USB drive. It could look like,
yeah,
lots of. What are things that parents that are watching this now can kind of look for? Because of course, kids probably know that their parents don't approve of it or don't want them to do it, so
right,
they're going to hide it.
right,
Um, but it's sometimes in plain view. What are we looking
right.
for?
Well, you're exactly like you said, that USB looking thing, or just the way your kid explains things to you as far as what you found in their room. If they're just yammering on about the excuse of what that is. My vapes today are so socially acceptable that there's no hiding them anymore. They don't make it a secret anymore. So you don't really see the USB type things anymore. But that was prevalent in the high schools when I was going there. They said these kids would just plug it in the side of their computer and then take it out, take a hit off of it, and then put it back. And the teachers couldn't tell what it was, and they couldn't go around to every single person and check that out.
Yeah.
One of the number one things when I go into high schools and I ask kids, what do you think is one of the biggest problems that they have on campus? They said vaping is the number one thing that they talk about. When they say, when I go to student leadership groups, at the Ronald Reagan Library or whatever I may be, the students, we did a big thing with the DEA and some of the teachers and stuff like that, and we were talking about that. And one of the biggest things was vaping. It wasn't even the hardcore drugs, but it was the vaping. I think a vaping could be a gateway as well, because now you could also buy a vape in marijuana. The 100% THC, or whatever percentage of THC you want to get. You're not just smoking the weed of the 80s and 70s anymore. It's pure THC, which is a psychoactive drug, which affects your brain, and and it creates all kinds of things, and mostly like a big paranoia. And a lot of these kids, if they get too stuck in it, they get into a big paranoia, bigger than
Hmm.
most people do. But yeah. So it's
Yeah.
just self-awareness, knowing what's around, what your kid's doing, watching their bank accounts. If you're giving them any money, watching, be on their bank accounts and see how they're spending their money, and
Hmm.
question that when they go out, and then being able to say, a lot of parents don't want to piss off their kids, and that's one of the big problems is that we see out there is we got a generation of people, parents that don't want to piss off their kids because we don't want to hurt their feelings or do whatever. I go, no, all
Hmm.
you got to do is be a parent. All you got to do is
Right.
be a parent. Don't be their friends. Don't be anything. Just be aware of what it is, because it's for their life. They learn,
100%.
90% of what a kid learns is from their parents.
Right.
It's actions and what your parents do and habits and all of that stuff. And that's,
Hmm.
you usually see your kid grow up just like you, sometimes good and sometimes bad.
Right,
But,
right. Well,
but
one of the lessons that I often talk with my students about is you can always learn something from everybody. You either learn what
right,
to do or you
right.
learn what not to do, right? And
Yes.
and I agree with you that our children are always watching us, and they
Yeah.
do mimic our behavior and our habits and everything. My wife here says, could vape detectors be helpful addition to the schools? I don't even know. What is a vape detector?
To tell you the truth, I haven't heard of a vape detector. I don't know how that would go. Like a metal detector or something.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because there's so many different flavors of this stuff. It smells like a cookie, so it could be, short of, a hamburger smell, but, if you ever walked around a vaping person, it's a sweet, enticing smell. It smells like a bakery. It smells, like the things you like.
Hmm.
fruity stuff or whatever it may be. So, how to detect it is the hard part. And at the time, because vaping wasn't considered in the schools a smoking device, they didn't know how to classify it at a time. So they didn't really get a headway on it. And our superintendent of schools started getting it, and he started understanding. And but by then it was already prevalent that these kids were, because they didn't stop it from happening because they didn't know how to classify it.
Hmm.
And what happened is, and now it's widespread in the schools, and
Yeah.
and it's very hideable. It's very hideable. You know.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I'm thinking back to when I was in high school. Um, there was always, it seemed to me, there was always someone in the bathroom back in my days,
Yeah. Yeah.
early '90s. There's always whatever term they were labeled, but they were
Yeah.
always in the bathroom because, like, I can remember people going in the bathroom, smoking in the bathrooms,
Yeah.
whether
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
smoking
There's a
cigarettes or
song for
smoking.
that.
Exactly, smoking in the
Yeah.
boys' room, right? Good old
Yeah.
Motley Crue.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's still happening. It's still
Yes.
happening, but they're doing. I mean, they're doing far more than that. Do you
Right.
see the schools and I'm not educated in this area, and I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but
Right.
do you think that we have enough security, if that's the word, on our campuses to kind of police that?
Not necessarily. I listen. I love the SROs and the how they do things out there, and what they do put on campuses, but they're spread thin through all. Like in Simi, one SRO, maybe two, but I think it's just one that covers all the high schools, middle schools, and whatnot. So they go. It's just, I think more security needs to be on there. More people need to be trained on drug recognition and the things going on there. If you're going to be and then, like I said, it's a sign of the times. We have to change that
Hmm.
because we're seeing that. It isn't just like when you or I were growing up. It was like cigarettes, marijuana, and alcohol basically were the three things that we used to see in school. We had a smoking section at my high school. you know, and everybody went there between a break and they smoked their cigarettes, with their fake parent ID, permission slips and whatnot. But in today's world, so what they do is what we've seen a lot in that one event I did at the Ronald Reagan Library with the student leadership was that these kids how the school started treating it was just lock up the bathrooms, and these kids can't use but one bathroom. They have to go to the office to use the bathroom in the office or whatnot. And what that was creating, it was punishing the kids that weren't doing drugs or doing things that they shouldn't be doing in the restrooms, and they were having to hold in. And this is it's kind of, if it seems funny, but it's not. It's these kids had to hold in going to the bathroom because they said they were afraid to walk into any of the bathrooms because of what was going on in there.
Hmm.
So now we're
Hmm.
creating a health issue on the kids who don't use it because they're paying the price for the ones who do use it. You
Right.
know,
So what do you think might be the answer? And it's really hard because, like you said, the SROs. Uh, First of all, it's time and money, right? Getting
right?
the schools
That's
funded enough to be able to get enough. But is that the only option? I mean, um, are there teachers that should be getting more involved, or do they think that maybe that's not part of their job, so they're just there to teach and not kind of
yes,
police that? Um,
yes,
I mean, it's just it's such a hard thing because I mean, there's kids ODing in the bathrooms because they're shooting up or they're doing something, and
right,
I mean, man, talk about a liability, right, for the
yes,
schools. So
exactly, and
so
and
what
it
do you
has
think the
happened.
answer is?
Well, I think the answer is just they need to put more awareness out there. We need to have more peer-based groups on campuses, which we try to fund anybody who will do that, but we can't get a high school kid to do that. Where it would stay on. Mostly they want to come in and do a high school senior project, but will that program carry on to the next year? Will it,
Hmm.
or is it just the sign of the times for your project? And some of these kids are very brilliant in the ideas they come up with. And I do believe that peer-to-peer uh, counseling or awareness groups on campus is one part of it. And then the other part is like the yard duty teachers and whatnot. They're the ones that are in the mix. They're in the mix of the students. They see some of these kids and they know
Hmm.
what's going on out there. Is to recognize that, teach them how to recognize um,
Hmm.
some of that stuff. Sometimes it's just a matter of a few hour course just to recognize what an overdose looks like, what somebody's stone looks like, and what are we going to do about it once you do find out, and do we call parents? And a lot of parents get pissed off because you take their time away from parents being at work, and they see that it's not as serious as a vape or a weed or thing, or something like that, and that some parents condone that behavior. Not
Well, you
all, but
mentioned
some.
you mentioned it earlier that it's really difficult. We live in an age where I always go back and think about this meme or this newspaper clipping where you've got a picture of parents taking their child to the principal's office, and everybody's pointing at the child, and then below that you've got parents that are bringing their child to the principal's office, and the kids and the parents are pointing at the principal like it's their fault, and it's this whole thing of being friends with their kids and not
Yes.
wanting to, like you said, piss them off. But I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
be a parent,
Yeah.
and you can have a great relationship with your kids and still parent. I mean,
Exactly.
the joke in my family is that my kids, since I teach martial arts, everything is a lesson. What's the lesson of the day today, Dad?
Yeah.
Or if I start, clean your room, I know I need to have more discipline. Like, they almost kind of like mock me in how I describe
Yeah.
it. But at the same time, I think maybe I've kind of touched a point where it sticks a little bit. And listen, I'm guilty just like any other parent of sometimes being pushed just a little bit to the other side. But
Right.
we're blaming the principals, and blaming the
Right.
teachers, when
Right.
we should really be accepting responsibility. I mean, if I got a phone call at work and it's about my child, and has an issue, like,
Right.
I'm the first to be like, what are you doing? What are you thinking? You know?
Right. Right.
So,
Well, I do believe in it takes a village concept. When you grew up and I grew up, it was our coaches that did it, but we weren't the molder of our kids. We just taught them that discipline like you do. When we're coaches out there, now a lot of parents send their kids to sports just for a basic. When I coached football, it was a lot of these parents would drop their kids off for a babysitting service.
hmm.
And they weren't there, and they were late to picking up their kids, and they were setting that mode up already.
Hmm.
Um, and you were talking about earlier about you did get to your kids because they're talking about what you taught them. And when they get older, they're going to carry that on. And believe it
They
or not,
mock
they
me.
will. I
They
know,
they they mock me.
I know, I know. But there's going to be a time. My kid's 24 now, my youngest one, and he's his own person now. And everything that we tried to teach him, it stuck with him. We didn't force him to do anything. Just be responsible for your own actions.
Hmm.
And if you believe in something, then that's what you would stick to,
Hmm.
and don't be manipulated by, peer pressure and other people doing things, and what the cool thing is, because a
Right.
lot of these kids aren't coming back from that.
Right.
And
Well, you
believe
talked
me,
about,
go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, you're talking about it takes a village. You know, I think that it's great when I love when students get involved in our martial arts school, and I always
Yeah.
tell the parents, I'm only with them an hour, 2 hours every week, but
Yes.
my goal is to help reinforce what you do at home. And I
Yes.
hope that you would do the same, reinforce what we teach in the school here. The same thing, when it comes to football or baseball and other sports.
Yeah.
I mean, do
Yeah.
you see typically, and I say typically, that kids that stay more involved in extracurricular activities, um, are able to kind of keep their minds off of some of these things? Typically, is
I
that
believe
accurate?
I think typically it keeps them focused because they know that discipline, you know. Um, I'll tell you what, we're living in an entitlement generation right now. Everybody thinks they're entitled to have everything without work, without, without repercussion, without, like you said, a parent will come into the school and complain before finding out the answer to why that kid had you come into that school in the first place. There was a reason why you're in this room, and it wasn't because of the teacher. It's because something the teacher seen your kid doing. You know,
Hmm.
but we're
Right.
trying to, like you said, you're trying to push it on somebody else to blame, to blame on that. But
Hmm.
but yeah, typically I think being involved with anything, it doesn't have to be sports. I go be involved with music, be involved with something, but
Hmm.
do something for yourself. Don't sit in your room, because that's a whole nother thing. Going back to social media and the internet and whatnot, is now we're just giving our kids these game consoles, and they're sitting in the room for all hours of the night, all hours of the night, not during the day because they're at school. And we're these kids are just used to just hanging out by themselves. They have no social skills. Having social skills, I think, is a big issue too, is getting out there and not being isolated, but getting out there. And that's what happened with COVID, was we
Hmm.
isolated everyone.
Right.
Everyone. It
Right.
doesn't matter
Right.
your discipline. If you had a discipline, it was no longer the discipline that you thought it was. Everybody had to change the mindset of what they were. And it took a lot, especially our kids. It took a lot for them to come up and stay disciplined. And what, like you said, whether it was martial arts or sports or anything, like all that stuff got out. All that stuff was thrown out with the COVID and everybody being isolated at home. The
Not here.
satisfaction.
Not here. We
Yeah,
we
right.
trained. We trained outside. We trained on Zoom. We
That
trained every which way we
And when
could.
my
Right.
gym closed, I went outside. I told people, let's go. The parks were empty when we
That's
should
right.
have been outside playing in the outdoors and getting that sunshine out there and doing that. You could have carried on, but a lot of kids' minds changed through that COVID thing, and they didn't
Hmm.
go back to their disciplines. They
Hmm.
just like, now it's like, I slept in. We're California, the California state legislator or whatever, the school is changing the start times for schools to 8:30 because kids are tired now, and all, they're too tired and they don't want to, they said scientifically it's affecting their grades. No, what's affecting their grades is them staying up all night playing social media, or playing on social media, or playing their video games.
Yep.
That's what
Yep.
I see.
I
We're taking
I
the And we're trying to find the solution by, let's do a later start time. Well, that puts them in a later going home time, which puts pressure on the parents because now they have to come home, and that's just in the high schools. The elementary schools stay at the same time. So now you got two different time zones that you got to put your kid into, drive your kid to school, or whatever it may be. And that to
Mhm.
me is just more alone time. Those kids can, have their
Right.
minds themselves. Yeah.
Well, when you're talking about isolation and being alone and being in the room, I have always felt that when children and adults too feel a sense of belonging, it adds to their self worth. Do you agree with
Right.
that?
Um, I think so too. Yeah, I think so. Yes. Yeah. Repeat that. Repeat that again. How you said that?
So what I was saying is their sense of belonging, be it to a music group, a good group of friends, a sports activity, their sense of belonging adds to their sense of self worth.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And when that was all taken away, that self worth went down. It went down.
Hmm.
Their social activities went down. Everybody just was stopped. Everybody stopped.
Hmm.
And they slept. And I did a couple of speaks with Zoom classes, and all it was headboards and ceiling fans that I was looking at. None of the kids were on Zoom doing the class that they were supposed to be in. I asked the teacher, I go, why is that? I thought they were supposed to stay on to, get a grade for the day. No, the entitlement part is that, the kids complain, so we let them go, and they just got to turn the Zoom on and
Yeah.
basically go back to sleep. And a lot of parents complained about that because it affected the parents too, because now their kids are sitting home for 24/7 doing nothing, while the parents, some were working, but some of them put the families in the same house, and
Hmm.
people weren't used to being with their families for that long of a period of time. Everybody had work or school or sports or something to go to, so everybody was kind of running around. But now we're isolated. Now what?
Right.
Everybody had to relearn how to communicate with
For
their own
sure.
families.
for
And
sure.
that was kind of,
Absolutely.
that's where I learned binge watching on Netflix, because I was off of work for 10 and a half weeks, and okay, and I did do my workouts and stuff like that, but I had nothing else to do. You couldn't go to the movies or anything. So I learned what Netflix was, and I learned what binge watching was. I never knew what
Right.
that word meant. So yeah,
Which is another addiction that we face.
yeah. I think everything has an addiction property to it. I mean, even being in martial arts, if you just, and it's a good thing. It's a positive thing. There's positive addictions and there's negative addictions. We're
Hmm.
human beings. When we taste something and we get that flavor in our mouths, when we like it, we want it more. Just like the first day that you put some sugar in your baby's mouth, and the
Hmm.
look on their faces, that changed their world.
Yeah.
And that's what goes on out there with our kids. Yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. Well, guys,
Yeah.
listen, we're getting ready to wrap things up here today. So if you have any last minute questions, there's still a few of you watching. So if you have any questions for Pat, please post them in the comments. But I just want to take a minute, Pat, to, just thank you for all the education that you're putting out there, for all the information. Thank you for all your efforts. It's definitely not an easy job. I
Right.
don't know that I could walk in your shoes and understand what you've seen and what you've heard and what you've been through with families. But I know that you are appreciated just by some of the comments so far, and just for what I know that you do. Um,
Well, thank you, Jason. I appreciate
Facebook
that.
user,
I got a great team behind me, and I can't do what I do without my team helping me do what I do. You know, so I got a great board that's behind me, and then of course, we depend on our volunteers to help us out as well. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. I have a
yep.
great team. Facebook user asks, Pat, what do you think of Narcan training at schools?
I think that Narcan training is the new additive to a first aid kit in anybody's household. With what we're seeing out there, it doesn't mean that you're going to use it. It doesn't mean that you're a drug addict or anything. It's an antidote that blocks the receptors in the brain. So if you accidentally take an opioid, it only works with opioids. If you accidentally overdose on an opioid, which also counts with the elderly people, because sometimes they forget how much medication they take,
Hmm.
but it prevents them from going into that overdose but they can't apply that to themselves if they're in an overdose. So they have to have somebody around them. I think the schools need to carry that around with them, and if not in the classroom, at least have it available with this person that's going to administer it, with the understanding of what it does and how it works.
Hmm.
Not just sitting there on a shelf, but being there available, training all the staff on it. You know, and
Is
that
there
isn't what
any
that isn't going to take the place. That doesn't take the place of 911. It doesn't take the place of the EMTs and stuff coming there, or the hospitalizations and stuff. But what it does is that it gives them a little bit of life left once you call 911 to give them Narcan.
mhm.
So yes.
And is there any downside to that?
No,
Is
to
there any
Narcan.
danger? No.
No.
Yes.
You could put it right. You could take that nasal right with you right now, unless you're on opioids. It wouldn't do nothing. You just lose the effect of the opioids, because it would block the receptors of what those does. So
Mhm.
it's harmless. It's non-addictive. It's harmless. You're not going to overdose on it. You're not going to become addicted to it. It's not going to make you do anything. You won't even know it's in you. So for anybody to get a hold of it, I'm not saying you should have it around where kids get a hold of it, but it would be harmless to adults and young kids, or like teenagers and stuff like that, if they
Right.
accidentally were to use it. Which is, to me, one kid did that one time. I did a display, and he accidentally he administered one of my things. I go, now you just took somebody's life away from me. What makes
Mm.
you think that you can go around and do that? Once again, we're dealing with the entitlement generation. He thought it was funny. I didn't. I lit him up, and
Mhm.
I think Narcan is a lifesaver for many, many people out there, and it's just something that we need to add to our first aid kits. It's the
Well,
sign of
awesome.
the time.
Well,
Yep.
thank you. Thanks for sharing all that information and
Well,
helping
thank you.
us understand a little bit better.
And if anybody does need Narcan, we do have it. We do train, and we do give it out as for free. So if anybody needs it, just contact notonemore.net, and we will get it to you.
All right. So not1more.net is where they
Yes.
can reach you, not only for that, but just for more information. If anybody
Right.
is struggling, or anybody in their family is struggling and
Right.
may need some help, to reach out. So,
Right. Or
Pat,
or message me on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, whatever it is. You can get a hold of me personally. I'm always available for people.
Excellent. Well, Pat, thank you again so much for joining us on the show today. I appreciate you sharing your story, all your
Thank you,
experience
Jason. I
and
appreciate you.
education. All right. Well, have a great day. And guys,
All
we
right.
will see you again on Master Motivation next Monday with our next guest. We have our next guest, Mr. Robert Perez. Can't wait to have him on the show. And thanks again, Pat.
All right. Thank you, Jason. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.